Selja means blessed or holy island. It was probably a cult site well before the advent of Christianity in Norway in the 10th century. It must have been a site of some cultic significance because it appears to have been appropriated and Christianized by Norway's first Christian missionaries. This is the story of this holy island and of the unusual female saint who is associated with it. I'm here in one of the holiest places in Norway. This cave site, according to legend, is where an Irish princess called Sunniva and her companions suffered martyrdom sometime in the middle of the 10th century. There's a tradition here that stretches back over 1,000 years of a cult to the holy people of Selja. This cave is where she is said to have died. According to the legend, Sunniva was the daughter of a king in Ireland who was approached by a tyrant who wanted to marry her. After the death of her father, she chose to leave Ireland with her people in order to avoid this unwanted marriage. They set sail in 3 boats and they let God decide which way they would go. And they were brought to Norway, where a storm divided the boats. One set went to the island of Kinn, a little to the south of here, and the other 2 boats landed here on the island of Selja. Here they lived holy lives and lived off the fish in the sea. But the local people, who were still pagan, suspected them of stealing their sheep, and they came one day looking for them. And the Irish men and women took refuge in this cave, where they prayed to God to rescue them from the pagans. The sea in the Middle Ages wasn't a barrier, it was more of a roadway. We're here looking out to the North Sea and the western way, the Vesterveger, which was a sea route west towards the British Isles and Ireland, Iceland, and further to Greenland in the Viking period. It was along this coastal highway that insular seafaring monks came to small islands in the North Atlantic. For them, this was the desert in the ocean, and they were modelling early Christian monks in Egypt who settled in the desert of the Middle East and North Africa. But for these monks, the ocean was their desert, and they would come to islands such as Selja for periods of ascetic retreat, for prayer and for peace. And the headland out there, Stad, this was the way north, the Nordveger, the northern way from which Norway is named. This was one of the most perilous points on the Norwegian coast. Seafarers used to take shelter here on this island before they would make the perilous sea journey across the Stad Peninsula further north to Trondheim and the whaling regions of northern Norway. So this was really a kind of nodal point in the seaways. You had Vikings coming here and also possibly insular monks. In the 10th century, a church was built here, probably a wooden church, to house the bones of holy relics that were discovered in the cave behind me. We're standing in the stone church which was built to house these relics. And on either side of the aisle you have 2 doorways that enter the church, and these were to allow the pilgrims who were flocking to the island to see the relics on the altar here. So some of his relics would have been placed here. They would have been venerated by the local people. And even far out at sea, this church would have been painted white, so people sailing along the coast could see the church in the distance. They could tell that this was the holy island of Selja. So this was a very important centre of pilgrimage right throughout the Middle Ages up to the Reformation. These impressive stone terraces were built for the pilgrims who used to come to Selja. And it's part of the religious complex, the cultic complex here on the island. We're just below the church of St. Sunniva, where the relics of the Selja men were housed. And once a year on the 8th of July, the feast day of the men of Selja, which was one of the most important feasts in medieval Norway, all the local people used to come here and gather on these terraces, and the priest would bring out the relics to show to the people. So this was a part of a ritual cultic display, and it's a very impressive part of the cultic complex here. So this is the monastic complex that survives on Selja. It was built around 1100 for Benedictine monks who came from England. It was dedicated to the British proto-martyr St. Alban, and it's also at the site of the first bishopric in Western Norway. It was a seat of the bishop right up until 1170, when the bishop moved to Bergen. So this was a religious complex, unusual in that it's a monastery and a seat of a bishop. And as you see, the remains of the monastery are quite substantial and one of the best preserved in Norway. Today Selja has experienced a revival as a place of pilgrimage and as a treasured cultural monument. New generations of Norwegians are rediscovering and reconnecting with the rich Christian heritage of their country. Every 8th of July, the feast day of St. Sunniva and the Selja saints, pilgrims come in their boats to the island to celebrate Mass in the ruins of the monastery and to hike up to the cave of Sunniva. Like the ancient medieval pilgrimage trail to the shrine of St. Olaf in Trondheim, which has become popular, the peace and beauty of Selja is drawing modern pilgrims in search of a calm anchorage in the busy seas of modern life.